Joe Biden became one of the most recognizable figures in modern American politics. To some, he represents resilience and empathy. To others, he symbolizes decades of political change in America. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. Joe Biden's life has been shaped by struggle, loss, and perseverance. Joe Biden was born on November 20, 1942, in Scranton. He grew up in a working-class family. His father, Joseph Robinette Biden Sr., experienced financial ups and downs. There were times when money was tight. The family knew economic struggle. Joe saw early what financial pressure could do to people. It shaped how he viewed ordinary American families. Later, the family moved to Delaware. That state would become central to Biden's identity. He would represent Delaware politically for decades. But as a child, he faced something deeply personal. Something painful. Something humiliating. Joe had a severe stutter. Speaking was difficult. Very difficult. Words would get stuck. Sentences became painful battles. Other children sometimes mocked him. They laughed. They repeated his words. They made him feel small. For many children, that kind of humiliation creates lifelong fear. It can destroy confidence. It can silence a person completely. But Joe refused to stay silent. Young Joe became determined to fight his stutter. He practiced relentlessly. He stood in front of mirrors. He repeated sentences over and over. He read poetry aloud. He trained his mouth and mind to work together. It required enormous discipline. Progress was slow. But something important happened during this struggle. He developed toughness. He learned persistence. He learned that progress often comes through repetition and pain. This lesson stayed with him forever. The boy who struggled to speak would later become famous for speeches. That transformation was extraordinary. Joe also developed emotional intelligence. Because he knew what it felt like to struggle, he became sensitive to other people's pain. He understood embarrassment, fear, failure. This helped shape his personality. He became highly empathetic. He connected easily with people facing hardship. Friends described young Joe as energetic and social. He loved sports. He loved competition. He also loved people. Even with his speech struggle, he remained outgoing. He had warmth and humor. People liked being around him. That natural connection would later become political strength. Then politics entered his life. Joe became interested in leadership while growing older. He admired public service. He believed government could help ordinary people. He was especially drawn to ideas of justice and opportunity. America in the 1950s and 1960s was changing fast. Civil rights struggles were reshaping the nation. Political debates were intense. Young Joe paid attention. He attended University of Delaware and later studied law at Syracuse University College of Law. He was not known as the top academic student. He was not the smartest person in every room. But he had something powerful: drive, ambition, and extraordinary people skills. Joe understood something many future politicians miss. People do not only vote for intelligence. They vote for connection. Trust matters. Emotion matters. The ability to make people feel heard matters. Joe had that naturally. Then came love. Joe met a woman named Nelia Hunter Biden. She was bright, warm, and full of life. Their connection was immediate. They fell in love. Soon, they married and began building a family together. Joe's life felt full of promise. Career, marriage, future. And his political rise was just beginning. At an age when many people were still figuring life out, Joe Biden was already thinking big. Very big. He did not want a small role in politics. He wanted to make real change. And soon, he would make one of the boldest moves of his life. He would run for the United States Senate. Most people thought it was impossible. He was young, relatively unknown, inexperienced compared to major national politicians. But Joe Biden had heard impossible before. And he never liked that word. When Joe Biden decided to run for the United States Senate from Delaware, almost no one expected him to win. He was young. He had limited money. He was competing against well-established political figures. For many observers, it looked like a long shot. But Biden had something stronger than political experience. He had energy. He had connection with ordinary people. And he had an ability to speak directly to voters' emotions. Even when speaking was difficult because of his stutter, he never avoided public life. Instead, he leaned into it. He practiced relentlessly. He memorized speeches. He worked harder than most of his opponents. His campaign strategy was simple but powerful. He focused on real people. Not elites. Not political insiders. He traveled across neighborhoods, small towns, and working communities in Delaware. He listened more than he spoke. And when he spoke, people felt sincerity. That authenticity slowly changed the race. The closer election day came, the more something unexpected began to happen. Support for Biden started growing. Polls tightened. Momentum shifted. His opponents underestimated him. They thought experience would win automatically. But voters were responding to something else. Trust. Energy. Relatability. Then came election night. Results began coming in. District by district. County by county. The race was extremely close at times. But slowly, the truth became clear. Joe Biden had won. At just 29 years old, he became one of the youngest people ever elected to the United States Senate. It was a shocking political victory. A young man from Scranton and Delaware had entered the national stage. His life had changed completely overnight. He was now a United States Senator. Power, responsibility, influence, all arrived suddenly. And with them came public attention. Joe Biden was no longer an unknown name. He was now part of American political leadership. But just as his dream was coming true, life delivered something devastating. Success and tragedy arrived at the same time. In December 1972, shortly after the election, Joe Biden's life was shattered. His wife, Nelia Hunter Biden, and their young daughter, Naomi Biden, were killed in a tragic car accident. The crash destroyed his newly built future in an instant. Biden had just achieved one of the greatest victories of his life. He was preparing to begin his Senate career. He was imagining a future of public service and family life. And suddenly, everything collapsed. He was left with unimaginable grief. He lost his wife. He lost his child. His world became silent. Friends and colleagues feared he might never recover emotionally. For many people, this kind of loss ends ambition completely. Politics, career, dreams. Everything becomes secondary. Survival becomes the only goal. Joe Biden considered quitting everything. He questioned whether he could continue. Whether he should continue. Whether life in politics still made sense. But something unexpected happened. He made a decision that would define his entire life. He chose not to give up. He chose to continue. Not because pain disappeared, but because he believed responsibility still mattered. And because his surviving sons needed him. From tragedy, a different kind of strength was born. Biden was sworn into the Senate in a hospital room. He began commuting daily from Delaware to Washington by train. He did not want to leave his family. So he made a rare decision in politics. He chose to live at home while working in the Capitol. This routine shaped his identity for decades. He became known as the man who takes the train. Every day, he traveled like an ordinary worker. He spoke with passengers. He listened to stories. He stayed connected to everyday life. That habit kept him grounded. In the Senate, Joe Biden began rebuilding his career. Slowly. Carefully. He focused on law, justice, and foreign policy. He learned how Washington worked. He grew more experienced over time. He became respected for his knowledge and persistence. But behind that public growth was a private story of resilience. A young senator carrying deep grief while building a political future. That contrast made his journey unique. Joe Biden's early Senate years were not just about politics. They were about survival. About finding meaning after loss. And about proving that life can continue even after it breaks you. And this strength would soon push him even further into national leadership. After the devastating loss of his first wife Nelia Hunter Biden and daughter Naomi Biden, Joe Biden continued his work in the United States Senate. But he was no longer the same person. Grief had changed him deeply. It made him more serious, more emotional, and more focused on what truly matters. He became known as a hard-working senator who spent long hours studying policy. While many politicians focused on headlines, Biden focused on details. He learned how laws were written. He studied foreign relations carefully. He built expertise slowly, but consistently. Year after year, his reputation grew. The man who survived tragedy was now becoming a serious force in American politics. One of Biden's strongest areas became foreign policy. He worked on major issues involving war, diplomacy, and global security. He served on important Senate committees where decisions shaped America's role in the world. He traveled, met international leaders, and studied global conflicts. Over time, he became recognized as one of the Senate's leading voices on foreign affairs. In Washington, experience matters. And Biden had decades of it. He learned how to negotiate, how to compromise, how to build bipartisan agreements. Even political opponents respected his ability to understand complex issues. At the same time, his personal life slowly began rebuilding. In 1977, Joe Biden married Jill Biden. She brought stability, support, and emotional strength into his life. Together, they formed a new family structure. They raised children. They created a sense of home again. After years of grief, this stability mattered deeply. Biden also became a devoted father. His surviving sons were his priority. He often structured his Senate schedule around family life. Unlike many politicians in Washington, he did not fully separate work from home. He tried to remain present as a parent. That decision shaped how people saw him. Behind the political career was a man still healing. As years passed, Biden's influence in the Senate continued to grow. He became chairman of the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. This position gave him major responsibility in shaping America's global strategy. He worked on issues involving Europe, the Middle East, and international security. He was involved in discussions about conflicts, alliances, and diplomacy. His role required careful thinking and long-term planning. Biden became known as someone who understood global politics deeply. He was not the loudest voice in the room, but he was often one of the most experienced. Over time, Joe Biden became a national figure. Not just a senator from Delaware, but a recognizable name across the United States. People saw him on television debates. They heard his speeches on major issues. He became associated with stability and experience. But his journey was not without struggle. There were political setbacks. There were failed campaigns. There were moments when his future seemed uncertain. In 1987, he even faced controversy during a presidential campaign, which forced him to withdraw. It was a difficult moment. A reminder that politics is unpredictable. Still, he returned to the Senate and continued working. That pattern became part of his identity. Fall. Learn. Return. Continue. And slowly, something important happened. His reputation transformed. By the 2000s, Joe Biden was no longer just a senator. He was seen as an elder statesman in American politics. Someone with decades of experience. Someone who had seen wars, elections, crises, and global change. He became a voice of institutional knowledge in Washington. His communication style also evolved. He spoke more openly about empathy, loss, and family. He often connected personal experiences with public policy. That emotional honesty resonated with many Americans. They saw him as relatable, even after decades in power. Then came another turning point. In 2008, he was selected as running mate for Barack Obama. This partnership brought him back into the national spotlight at the highest level. From longtime senator to Vice President of the United States. But that chapter is another story. Because Joe Biden's journey was still far from over. The boy who struggled to speak. The senator who survived tragedy. Was now entering the final stage of his political rise. And soon, he would reach the highest office in the world. After decades in the United States Senate, Joe Biden reached a new level in American politics in 2008. He was chosen as running mate by Barack Obama. For Biden, this moment was not just political. It was personal validation after a long and difficult life journey. From tragedy to recovery to national leadership. In 2009, Biden became Vice President of the United States. He moved into the center of global decision-making inside the White House. For someone who once struggled to speak clearly, standing on the world stage felt almost unbelievable. But Biden had spent a lifetime preparing for pressure. And now he was ready for responsibility at the highest level. As Vice President, Biden played a key role in major decisions. He worked on economic recovery after the financial crisis. He supported foreign policy missions and international diplomacy. he became a trusted advisor to Obama. Unlike many vice presidents in history, Biden was highly active and influential. But even after reaching the White House again, life continued to test him. In 2015, Joe Biden faced another devastating loss. His son, Beau Biden, who was seen as a rising political leader, died from brain cancer. This tragedy reopened old wounds from decades earlier. A father losing a child again. A pain that never fully disappears. Biden considered stepping away from politics completely. He took time away from public life to grieve. But once again, he returned. Because his life story had always followed the same pattern: loss, recovery, and continuation. In 2016, Biden finished his role as vice president. Many believed his political career was over. He was older. He had experienced too much personal loss. And Washington was changing quickly. But history had other plans. In 2020, during a time of national crisis, Biden entered the presidential race. The United States was facing political division, economic uncertainty, and global challenges. His message focused on unity, empathy, and stability. He spoke directly to the emotional state of the country. Not just policy, but healing. The man who once struggled to speak was now speaking to a divided nation. In November 2020, Joe Biden won the presidency. He became the 46th President of the United States. At the age of 78, he was the oldest person ever elected to the office at that time. From Scranton to the Senate. From tragedy to the White House. His journey had reached its final peak. Inside the White House, Biden now led the country during a complex period. He faced global challenges, domestic division, and major economic issues. His leadership style emphasized empathy, communication, and experience. He often spoke about rebuilding trust in American institutions. For supporters, Biden represented stability and humanity. For critics, he represented political establishment and long-term system politics. But for everyone, one thing was clear: his life story was one of the most dramatic in modern American history. So how will history remember Joe Biden? His legacy is deeply shaped by resilience. A childhood stutter that never defined him. A Senate career built on decades of persistence. A life marked by unimaginable personal loss. And a return to the highest office in the world. Joe Biden's story is not just about politics. It is about endurance. About continuing when life becomes unbearable. About finding purpose after tragedy. From a young boy in Scranton to President of the United States, Joe Biden became a symbol of survival and persistence in American political life. And perhaps that is the final lesson of his story: no matter how many times life breaks you, you can still rise again.